right, well, welcome. I am Lisa Ivy. I'm here with my good friend Travis Gordon. We're going to talk a little bit about devices today and things parents need to know about what their kids are doing with certain aspects of technology. So, Travis, tell us about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your work experience, why you are the technology genius. As I like to tell the kids in schools, Travis invented the internet. So tell us about that.
So why I am the way I am.
Yes.
So I grew up in a house with kind of an older father that was always interested in technology. He was retired and he had a lot of free time on his hands. And so he would piddle around in the yard a little bit, but he loved photography. So he was always playing with cameras. We always had computers in the house, back up to all the way to the dial-up days. And so having an older father that was interested in these things, he then couldn't fix it when it broke. And so that's kind of where a role that I just stepped into was learning how computer things work, and not really so much the hardware side. It's like I've never, everybody assumes you're into tech. So like, how many computers have you built? I've never built a computer. But the software side is what's always really interested me and how that interacts, with people essentially. And so I've just always been just interested in technology, and so that ended up following me for my whole life. So I went to UT, graduated with a marketing degree. The job market wasn't great when I graduated, and so I was already working for the IT department there and the Apple Store at the time, and so I just kind of fell into this job that I'm in. So I work in IT at the University of Tennessee in our support side, and so this whole following how computers work and how people interact with them has just been something that I would say I fell into, and it was one of those areas where I always tell people try to find somewhere where you can have a passion and then make money doing it, and find where those two things intersect. And so these things just always intersected with me, and so that was really I think how my technology journey began was at home interacting with it, and thanks to a really supportive father.
I love that you were the help desk at your house before
That's
you
where
were
it
the actual
starts.
help desk. I didn't realize that about your dad. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's so when I interview people, that's usually one of the signs of a pretty good tech actually is they're the help desk for their family. And so we hear that a lot in the industry, and so that's where most people end up starting. They're like, I was IT for my family, and I was like, all right, I'm pretty good at this. Maybe I should try to make money doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're doing it professionally because you're also my IT. So that's great. You're my help desk and have been multiple times. So, all right, well, let's get into our topic a little bit here. We know that predators are using the internet as a way to reach kids. But let's talk specifically about devices. So devices like smartphones, iPads, Chromebooks. How are those specifically creating an access point where predators are able to reach kids within their own homes?
Yeah, well, these days, when we go into classrooms and we're like, hey, how much time do you spend on your device? These kids are thinking about their phone. And so we'll hear lots of numbers about I spend 3 hours a day on my phone. I spend 12, 24, which is shocking. Like, when do you sleep? But when they're thinking about these things, they're not thinking about all the other access points. And so most schools now have gone to Chromebooks. And so you've got that Chromebook in front of you. And teachers have ways to kind of monitor what the kids are doing on those. But we have where these kids wake up, the first thing they do, if their phone's not already in the bedroom with them, is they go to their place where their phone is. And one of the things that's kind of a common thing is that's what their parents are doing too. And so they're just modeling those behaviors.
Yeah.
And so they've got their phone with them to start the day. And then they go to school and they have a computer in front of them instead of their big textbook. One of the things that I was joking about recently with my wife is I remember being in school and having our textbooks, and one of the things we did on the first day of class was take like paper bags and cover them to try to protect the book. These kids will never know that because their books and everything all the way up from grade school to college are all online now. And so this entry point, they have the internet at their fingertips all day long in between, even when they're not allowed to have their phone at school. They have it through their school's internet, and students are finding out ways to get around the parental controls. And what happens is that one student gets around it, and then the word gets out.
Yeah.
And so they figure it out. So like I went to a summer camp a few weeks ago, and Apple has made it super easy to share passwords. And so there are a lot of kids that don't know the password to the church camp's Wi-Fi network, but all they have to do is connect to it, and somebody that is in their contacts list can hit the share button, and then it just exploded. So that internet access is everywhere now. And so they get home and they will fire up their gaming console. They'll be chatting. They'll be watching YouTube while gaming. And so it's there in front of us in ways that it's just never been before in human history. And so they have really easy access to it no matter where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up a good point with kids they have, even if parents are holding off on devices, the schools a lot of times are
Correct.
giving them those devices. So when our kids were growing up, our schools were raising money so that we could be one-to-one schools,
Yeah.
we really wanted every kid to have a Chromebook. And that was the greatest idea because our kids are going to be so ahead with technology. But I don't think anybody really thought, and I know I didn't at the time, we didn't think about the risks that were also coming in and that extra exposure
Exactly.
that our kids had online. And so that's some of what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about some specific apps, and we'll get into a lot more of this with some later episodes as well. But what kind of apps or features on these devices that kids are using? Chromebooks, iPads, iPhones in particular. If they're using an Android, most of them don't, but if they're using an Android, what kind of apps or features are most commonly used by predators in order to make contact with those kids?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about social media and gaming. I think those are the two that are the most obvious and apparent, and the ones that if parents are doing anything to try to help limit their interactions with other people, they're doing it with those two apps. But there are some other interesting ways that people use technology. One of the things that I have always learned in my time of supporting other people is people will find really creative ways to do things that may not be the easy way, but it's a way it works. For example, like schools may ban Google Chat, right? And so, but what the administrators and teachers may not know until they find out is, hey, I can open a Google Doc. I can share it with my friend who sits next to me, and Google Docs allows live editing of documents. And so they can literally have a live chat through a Google Doc.
Yes.
And so if they share that document out with anybody else, they can essentially open live chat through a Google Doc. And so they will find very, very creative ways to get around the parental controls or any sort of school controls. And so I think the big thing there is think about what you would do to get around the control. And so when you see that and you think like, okay, so if I was trying to get around this, what would I do? Ask your kids those questions, like seed those things to them and say, okay, so this is how you would break into the bank essentially.
Yeah. You're sort of thinking from that perspective.
Yeah. So think about it and so you kind of reverse engineer the answer out of them. And I think that's a really good way to do that. And then you've also got a bunch of other messaging apps. And a lot of these are legitimate apps, like one of the really popular right now internationally across the world is WhatsApp. WhatsApp has even started advertising on TV. Like a year ago, I've never seen a WhatsApp commercial.
Yeah.
And now you see it and they're like, hey, yeah, we boast end-to-end encryption. We can't even see what you're talking about. Which is great maybe for WhatsApp because then that absolves them of any sort of responsibility.
Right.
So there's a little legal action there that they're taking to try to cover themselves. But there's good uses for apps like that. Like that's a way that we communicate with some of our missionary friends.
Right.
Because it's able, if you have a Wi-Fi connection, you can connect and you don't have to worry about the limitations of like messages on iPhone versus the messaging app on Android. You don't have any of those things, and so it's also encrypted, so you don't have to worry about those communications getting intercepted if you are communicating with, say, missionaries that are in a sensitive place. And so it's great that those things are secure. The bad thing is that it opens up them to be able to talk to anybody in the whole wide world.
Yeah.
And so you don't even have to have their phone number anymore. And so connecting to these people is a lot easier than it's ever been before. And so monitoring those apps that they're using, saying like, hey, I noticed that you have this installed on your phone. What are you doing with that? One of the common things I think that you're going to hear throughout this whole series is engagement is so important. And making it okay to have this conversation in our family of, hey, I need you to explain what you're doing with this. And so I think that's the big thing is monitoring those apps that they're installing, making sure you're approving every app that goes on there.
Yeah.
And then occasionally asking them, hey, what are you doing with this? Like, show me what's happening here.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. And really, any app that has the possibility for a chat feature is going to be a place where kids are vulnerable. I see stories all the time about apps that shock me, book apps, where you can sort of like a library type of app. But there is a chat feature where you can write reviews about, what the story was like. Predators access kids in those places all the time. Or like the Bible app, which is shocking to me. I mean, and really terrible, but predators can access your kids in those places. So if there's a chat feature, that's something we want parents to be aware of. Watch out for that, monitor that with your kids and make sure you know what they're doing there.
Yeah, you mentioned the Bible app. That's actually one that I know of somebody who had parental control set up against adult websites, and their son actually somehow happened upon a like built-in browser essentially that was in the Bible app, and it got around the parental controls. And so he caught himself basically doing that, and he went into his dad and said, "Hey, Dad, I was in the Bible app of all apps. And I ended up getting somewhere I just shouldn't need to be. And I bailed on it, but I need you to know that like I messed up here. And that there's this little secret back door in these apps that you would never think of. And again, the kids are clever. They will find it. Like I always use like the Jurassic Park, like life finds a way. And so they will find a way to get around these things. And so that's why you can have all the controls you want in the world, but the best control is going to be you.
Yeah. Well, that leads us into the next question, which is about firewalls. So in the state of Tennessee now, it's actually state mandated that if a school issues, whether it's private, public, doesn't matter. If the school issues a device to a child, they are required to install a firewall on that school issue device. So if it's a Chromebook, iPad, whatever. And the firewall has to travel with the device. I'm saying that in my stupid terms. I'm not, being techie with it, but it has to travel with the device. So if the Chromebook comes home, the firewall is still active on the Chromebook. It doesn't matter what wireless network it's on. But kids find ways around these things, So let's just talk about firewalls. First of all, why is it a good idea to have a firewall? Let's talk about what it does. Explain that for people like me who have no idea what that actually means. What does it mean?
Yeah, so you essentially have two different layers of the firewall. You have the actual, like when you go into a school on their Wi-Fi, or you go into any public place, essentially on their Wi-Fi, they have access controls, So it basically says who can come in and who can come out. And that's what a firewall does. Is it stops somebody at the border. It's like the walls of a castle, and says, hey, you can come in, but you can't come in. So like at UT, we block peer-to-peer. And so a lot of the parents that may be watching this may remember, apps like Kazaa and LimeWire and Napster back in the day.
Napster.
Right? And so those were how we may or may not have gotten our music at a period in time. And so
we cannot relate to that
so
on camera.
I can't say I ever did anything like that, but that is how people may have gotten music at some point in history.
Yes.
Potentially. And so it's all theoretical, of course, how they may have gotten it. And so that's called peer-to-peer. And so over a decade ago, the state mandated that all state institutions have to block peer-to-peer. Now, there are some very valid reasons to have peer-to-peer. Actually, famously, when UT blocked peer-to-peer, one of the most common groups of people that we heard from was World of Warcraft players, because it was an online RPG game. And the way that the manufacturer pushed out updates was through peer-to-peer. And so they would, send it out to somebody, and then the other peers help with the download. And so that's one of the ways that you could download the game, and it blocked that, and people were really upset.
So all the nerdy kids were really mad.
All the nerdy kids, which definitely also wasn't me,
yes,
were really upset that they couldn't download their updates. But then there's also academic reasons. That would be how schools pass large amounts of data at the time too, through peer-to-peer. And so we had to block that. And so you do that through firewall rules, and they say, hey, anything that is communicating over this peer-to-peer channel is not allowed anymore. And so that's how a lot of the blocks are happening now at schools too, is it says, hey, these things like, so TikTok, for example, banned in all federal and state schools. So like UT had to ban TikTok.
Right.
And so they do that with the firewall rule that says, hey, if it's coming from TikTok's servers, there's stuff up there in the cloud. If it comes from this destination, it is not allowed in. And so like the best way I know to explain that is, so, like if it would be like if there was a firewall in Carnes, it would say, hey, nobody from PAL is allowed in, and they're able to define who's from PAL. And so it's really that easy. And so it happens that way in a technical term. And so that's the firewalls that are up on those networks. And then individual devices have firewalls that do the same thing. And so they put in controls on the devices so that way they can control their stuff at their institution, but then they can also control this device as it goes around to all of its various Wi-Fi connected places. And so they put individual controls to determine what can come in and come out on the device itself. And so it works the same way as the other firewall does, but it controls those things. And so that way students aren't then also, susceptible to getting in as much trouble.
Right.
But as always, the life finds a way, and students will find ways around the firewall controls. I know that there are students that have figured out, like, hey, I can stream Fortnite through my Chromebook that I use from school because Microsoft's made a big push into cloud gaming. And so that's one of the ways that you can go and you can play games online, and the schools some of these schools are Google schools, some of them are Microsoft schools, and so
Yeah.
they're not blocking all Microsoft services because then they can't do their educational things. And so that's one of those things where Microsoft does gaming and they do
Yep.
productivity tools, and so it's a little bit more of a challenge to figure out, oh, well, how do we block just the gaming side of it because it's all coming from the same place.
Right. Gosh, that makes sense. Okay, so do you recommend that parents have a firewall on your home issued devices, your home wireless network? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I definitely recommend for parents, whether so you have two different ways you can approach this. So a lot of internet service providers, ISPs for short, and so that's your Comcast, AT&T, KUB, LCUB, fiber. All of these vendors typically essentially make you use their own equipment now.
Right.
And so that's a good and bad thing. And one of the good things is a lot of these companies like AT&T, like Comcast, they offer you internet protection as part of that, what you're paying for your monthly service and having to use their equipment. So that's one of the good things about that. The hard part is getting in there and figuring out how you block stuff.
Right.
And so, a lot of them have apps that you can interact with now to try to help control. I know like the AT&T app, for example, as devices connect to the network, you can assign it to a person. You can say, hey, this is my iPhone. This is my son's iPhone. When it's connected to the internet, put on these parental controls. And so those things have gotten a lot easier. You just have to do the due diligence and spend the time to figure out how to set up those devices. And so you can assign the gaming devices to it. You can assign iPads, iPhones, the computers. You can assign them to a person. And then that makes it really easy to say, hey, this person, no matter which device that they're connected to, they have to follow these sort of rules, like no adult websites.
Right.
You can even set up rules to where, hey, they can't connect to the Wi-Fi outside of these hours. And so fortunately, we're getting to a point where internet service providers and the tools that they offer are a lot better.
Yeah.
If you choose to go a different route, you can use, third-party Wi-Fi tools. And so like we also have like an Eero network set up at our house. It also has an app where I can assign profiles, but you can also through that app, and you may be able to do this through the other AT&T and like Xfinity apps, but I can wholesale block apps. So I can say, hey, TikTok in my house, which is a standard rule that I have, no TikTok in the house. I can block the app TikTok just wholesale.
Yeah.
And so you can help give yourself a lot more control there. You can also instead of doing a block list, you can take a child's profile and do an allow list and say, hey, you can only go to these certain websites that I've approved. And so you can set those up for your home network as well.
Which I think if you've got little kids maybe who are using like the iPad, that's probably the way you want to do it, is
allow
have these
list.
4 or 5 websites that you can possibly, or apps that you can get on, and everything else is a no. But I love that I love that these companies are making it easier and more user-friendly, because nobody wants to get on the phone with Comcast for 3 hours and try to figure out how to set up I don't want to talk to Comcast ever for any reason. So I'm glad they're making that an easier thing for parents in general.
Yeah, but let me say one thing about that though. Is don't give yourself a false sense of security.
Right.
Because if you have older kids, they're already on your cell phone plan, and you're like, haha, I have thwarted all internet access that I don't want them to have. All they have to do is just swipe down and turn off their Wi-Fi, and they're connected back to their cellular network.
Yeah.
And so that's where the interaction, setting device level controls, Apple and Google both for iOS and Android, they offer some ways to do these sort of device level controls. And I know you feel like, oh man, I'm setting controls all over the place, but that's what you have to do.
Right.
Right. Like when you go to bed, you don't just lock the back door.
Right.
Right. You lock every door to your house, and you make sure the garage is shut before bed. And that's because there's different access ways. You make sure that if you have a home security system, that you've got even the windows have some sort of monitor on there.
Right. Yeah. The Ring doorbell camera is on.
Yeah. The Ring
for a reason, and the door is also locked.
And so when we think about our physical safety, we think about that for our kids a lot. Like there's never a time where my kids go to their sports thing or they go to camp and I don't tell them be safe.
Right.
Because there's lots of ways you can not be safe. And so we think about their physical safety a lot. But now even more so, we're having to think about their digital safety.
Yeah.
And so when you're having to go through and take the time to set up all these controls, take that time, because it's going to be worth it now, because it's going to save you some potential, heartache and difficult conversations in the future.
Absolutely. And I think this is a problem that you want to tackle from as many different layers as you possibly can, to give yourself and your kids the best fighting chance that you have for protecting them and keeping them safe. So that's great advice. All right, let's talk about phones. I know you're an Apple guy. You've been an Apple guy for all the years that I've known you. So what do you think parents need to know about iPhones?
So as far as it comes to iPhones, it's really there's not a big difference these days between iOS and Android. And I know that anybody who is fanboys on either side are gonna just start throwing hands over that.
Sure.
But both of these companies have a lot of parental controls in place now. And so the big thing there is taking advantage of them. One of the things that a lot of parents don't know on both of these platforms is that you can set up your children as part of your family. And so I talk to a lot of parents, and then even spouses. They're like, yeah, whenever I'm in my Apple Music, I've got all my spouse's music here, and I don't listen to that. And I'm like, wait, you share an Apple ID? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, how do you text? And they're like, oh, it's a huge pain. We have to set up all these things. And I'm like, you're doing this the hard way. And so whether it is Apple, whether it is Google, either way, you have the ability to set up a family. And so I have a family where me and my wife are the parents in it, and then each of our children are set up as child accounts. And so the good thing is that it does set up a Apple ID for them, and so they've got an Apple ID. And so good and bad, it gives them an Apple ID, but it also gives them the ability to message without having a phone number. And so that's great because then they can message their aunts, their uncles, their grandparents. We even let them message their friends as long as we see that. We help look at their contacts and make sure that we know these people that they're messaging. And so it opens up that world to them, but also opens up a way for them to be able to access things that they don't need to. So there's just that give and take.
Sure.
But you have the ability there to know what's going on and set them up. And so that way you can do things like have to approve apps. One of the things that we subscribe to that is really helpful, because you have to be careful with apps, is that free apps are never free. If they are downloading a free app off the App Store, then the product is you. You are the product, because they're going to be hitting you with ads, and they can be playing a game that is completely geared toward kids, and then an ad comes on, and that company that's pushing the game, they're not really controlling the ads that are coming through, so you can't be as upset with them. But when those ads come in, you don't know what that ad's going to be for. And so that's a really dangerous thing for parents. And so one of the things that we do is we go ahead and subscribe to Apple Arcade. And so if our kids come up and they say, hey, can I have this app? My first question is, okay, is it on Arcade? Google has a similar feature as well. And so what those are apps that you pay a monthly subscription service to, but there's no ads. And so I can pretty much, as a parent, say, hey, is it on Apple Arcade? Yeah, cool. Have the app. Go ahead, go nuts, have fun.
Yeah.
And it's not a big deal.
Yeah,
and I don't
pop the bubbles.
I don't have to go do all the research and stuff, because I know that they're not going to get served ads, and that's usually the worst part of any game.
Right.
Is going to be the ads that come in.
Right.
Especially for mobile games.
Yes.
And so that really, really helps there. And so you can set up those to where they can only also access games or content that is a certain age. And so we also subscribe to Apple Music. So Google has YouTube Music, same thing. And so it's kind of funny, because me and my kids will be in the car, and I'll have be playing an album, and they're like, oh, I haven't heard this song. And I'm like, oh, really? You were just listening to that album? And you're like, no, it's explicit. And so therefore it's removed from the album altogether. So like their track listing goes from like 1, 2 to 4.
Yeah.
And
you're like, but I got mine on Napster, so it's fine.
And so it makes it easy. And so take advantage of these ecosystems, because, one of the things that, that Apple, gets a hard time from Google people is they lock you into the ecosystem. Well, Google locks you into an ecosystem too. Like
right.
Everybody's trying to lock you in their ecosystem because they don't want you leaving.
Yeah, they all want to sell you something.
That's why Facebook bought Instagram, because they wanted to lock you into this ecosystem. That's why Facebook got into purchasing Meta, because they wanted to get into the VR space. And so instead of doing it themselves, they went and purchased a company. And so go ahead and get into one of those ecosystems and set yourself up as a family, so that way you and your spouse are not having to share the same music. But then you're also able to set up your kids for success, because you can then set those parental controls. And both of those manufacturers do a really good job of at least letting you set up some boundaries. One place that they don't do a great job, though, is in messages. They do not give you the ability to not delete messages. And so that's one of the little pain points that is a little bit frustrating as a parent, is there's some places where they don't quite go far enough.
Sure.
And that's where the stepping in, the interaction with them, reading the messages, looking through deleted, setting up get ground rules. Like, you don't delete deleted messages. You leave those there. Same thing for their photos.
Yeah.
You don't empty your deleted photos ever.
Yeah.
And so getting involved there is really important.
Yeah. Those are both great points, and great, just some practical common sense things to teach your kids as some house ground rules. Like, you cannot delete these messages. Something that I always talk to parents about when it comes to pictures is it's really tough to take naked pictures when you're sitting in the living room with your parents,
Also
right?
true.
Like that happens behind bedroom and bathroom doors. So having a policy in your house where there's no devices behind closed doors. Like if you got your cell phone, if you're in your bedroom, that's fine, but the door's open, you know, like you're in the living room with us or iPad or whatever, even gaming consoles. It's good to have those in a central location for that reason. So we talked a little bit about Apple's parent monitoring features, but there's some really great parent monitoring apps. I know Bark is one that we always recommend because they do such a great job. I feel like they're probably top of the list of parent monitoring apps because they really do a great job of trying to bring in young voices to their company to try to help parents figure out exactly what you're talking about. Like we're working our way backwards and going to figure out how you would break into the bank. So I think they do a great job with that. But I also like that on the Bark parent monitoring app, it's not cloning your child's device. You're not getting every text. You're not having to read every single thing, but they scan for keywords and they send you a notification, which I think is great. But have y'all ever used Life 360? Are you into that phase yet with your kids?
Not
that's another
yet.
one that's
and
great.
I didn't realize they had a free version. And so I've been waiting for the Life 360 subscription because everybody has enough subscriptions these days.
Yes.
But I've been waiting for that one until my oldest started driving.
Yeah. And you're almost there.
So we are getting really close to that. And so right now we use Find My. So again, Apple has a really basic version of Life 360.
Yeah.
So they were, I know where they are, and so, and again, if you set up as a family account, if you're a husband and you need to know if your wife is at Target again, Find My will give you that information.
Yes.
And so you've got those, but then Life 360 also just gives you a little bit more information. And so it lets you know how fast they're driving or how fast the person they're riding with is driving.
Yes.
And so it gives you a little bit more of that like real time detailed information about, where they are, how fast they're going. And so, you also mentioned Bark. And one of the funny things is we actually saw Bark in action at our kid's school. So he was working on a slideshow about Julius Caesar. And we started getting notifications. Hey, your child is talking about murder and suicide. And I was like, and so I got this notification, and I'm like, okay, like you're like instantly you're thinking like worried. You
yes,
worried
the
panic
worst
mode.
case scenario.
And so I just walk into so you mentioned having these devices in public places. So so phones and gaming consoles are all in a bonus room that has a camera in it.
Yeah.
And so the camera is on, and so we're monitoring what's going on. So it of course can't read the phone, but we can see what's happening in the places these things are being used. And so I went in there and I was just like, hey, so what you working on? He's just like, it's my slide deck for Julius Caesar. And I just kind of paused for a second and had a laugh. And I was just like, oh, okay, so he's probably
Thank
okay.
you, Bark. Yes.
But Bark was doing its job.
Yeah,
there. It was saying, hey,
yeah.
we noticed these themes coming up.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how these apps work. Is they're scanning through for just themes that they have trained it to do. For anything that may look a little bit off. And so, it's always good when you get the false positives, but you never know whenever you're going to finally actually get the one that's just like, oh, hey, no, this is something, maybe a conversation that we need to have.
Yeah. Yeah. And those apps are not just scanning for like exploitation related things.
Oh, yeah.
It's exactly what you're talking about. Murder, suicide. It could be bullying. Or it could be anything sexual, drug related. This is a huge way that kids are accessing drugs and drug dealers is through social media. And so those notifications that come to parents, like you said, the false positive is maybe going to give you a good laugh, but I'd much rather have that and have 1,000 of those and then also the one that you really needed to get. So
Exactly.
So I know there are also going to be parents who are like, we're not even in the world of phones yet with our kids. Like that's so far from what we're thinking. And that's fine. But there are some great, what they call step up phones now. I don't know if you've used any of those with your kids or not, but Gab Wireless is really the company that started that trend of the step up phones. Bark has made one now. TrueMe, there's several different competing models, but the idea is it looks like a smartphone. And so like Gab has partnered with Samsung to make theirs. And so they've got a really sleek profile of the phone. It looks good, but there's no internet access on those phones. And so the kids can call, they can text, they can take pictures. There's parent approved apps like AM, FM radio, but there's a lot less that the parents have to monitor. And you're still teaching your kids essentially the responsibility of what it is to have a phone without jumping into that world of we're ready to give them a smartphone yet. So those are some options for parents to consider as well when it comes to those things. So, all right, how effective do you think that the parent monitoring features are? We know and love that they exist, but there's going to be downsides. And you've already mentioned some of that, but speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I would call them pretty good.
Yeah.
And so as far as the site filtering, in my experience, that seems to work pretty well for most of the common popular sites.
Sure.
And so if they're using their web browser to access these things, then Apple and Google are doing a pretty good job of catching those. The home security tool. If you try to go to something that you shouldn't go to, like, it's going to block that. The problem is that there are a lot of other sites that you don't realize that have access to those kind of things, and typically they are some sort of social site. And so, so sites like Instagram and Twitter, these are social apps, and so they aren't necessarily passing the website information that it knows to block, and so you can still access things that you should not access through those apps. And so making sure that and those apps also don't really have parental controls built into them as well, especially like Twitter,
right?
Or X. It doesn't have that. Now, Instagram does have a really helpful feature now called teen accounts. And so they are trying to step into that space and try to help, which are going to limit those interactions. And so make sure that you get that set up. But then it's going to go back to the life finds a way. There are so many apps that if you're not monitoring what's going on the app, then you're going to miss something. And so even if they say, like, clear their history or something, if you go to the For You section on Instagram or Twitter and the For You stuff is stuff that is maybe stuff that shouldn't be for them, that's going to be a dead giveaway that they're looking into things that they shouldn't be.
Yep.
Now, sometimes, like, you may you may legitimately stumble upon something, right? And then the algorithm starts just feeding you stuff, and you're like, how do I get rid of this?
Yeah.
And I would tell kids, hey, if the algorithm ends up taking over for things that you shouldn't be seeing, go ahead and just be like, hey, Instagram is doing this. They are serving me stuff here that I don't want to be seeing. I want you to know. That way, if you're sitting beside me, in the car and you look over and you see this, that you're not going to start freaking out. So that's where, like, it's just good for kids that whenever they get themselves into a situation that may be harmful for them or maybe a little step further than they anticipated taking something, then just go ahead and communicate with that parent. Let them know, hey, I did this, I messed up, because if they know ahead of time, the consequences for you are typically going, to be a lot less severe.
Yes.
And so the thing is that these monitoring apps are only ever going to be pretty good because kids are going to find ways around them. It's really hard to keep up with the way that the internet is changing. One of the things that I kind of hope will be helpful for this generation that's coming up is there are some laws right now that are going around at the federal level for online sites to have to do age verification before allowing access to the site. And so really it's on some of those companies to do the right thing. The problem is doing the right thing usually costs money.
Yes.
And so they're not really super excited about doing the right thing typically.
Right.
And so that's where there may be some ways where the government may actually help step in some ways that are going to be helpful.
Who would have thought that would ever be a statement anyone would ever say?
I think they're at least trying.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we're seeing some progress in that. And you're right. There are several pieces of legislation that are pending right now that are going to be really positive in that space. So that's a plus for sure. Okay, what do you think that is one thing parents don't know about how their child's device work? For instance, iPhones, that you think every parent absolutely needs to know?
I think it goes back to that setting up the family. Whenever I hear parents say things that sound odd to me, like sharing the music,
yes,
I'm like, hey, well, how about you set up your household as a family? And they look at me like, what are you talking about? And so I think it is actually taking the time, and that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Actually, the last conversation I had with somebody about this, I was just like, yeah, you just need to split your account, set up, and they was like, oh, that sounds like a lot of work. And it probably is. But doing the hard work to try to help separate those things. And so using features that are already there,
yes,
like setting up the family, is to me, it's the big thing. I think so that would be one thing. Another thing too is, again, something else I think we touched on a little bit, but kids using apps in unique ways that you would not think that they would use them in. So, the Google Doc chat room, essentially.
Yes.
And
drafting is what they call it.
So drafting. And so I think that's the thing, is that the kids are going to find ways to get around the controls that you set up. And so again, that interaction, that involvement, that is going to be a key theme that we touch on. We talked about last time. We're going to talk about this time. We're going to talk about for the next two sessions. That interaction with the parent is so crucial. and just monitoring. And don't be afraid. I think we talked last time about the concept of a child and their privacy.
Yeah.
For a device that you're paying for the internet that you're paying for,
A lot of money.
which is not cheap.
Yeah.
There should be really, and we use this phrase in our house, there's no expectation of privacy.
Yes.
So, when it comes to the internet and the things that they're doing on their phone, until you want to pay for this thing and you are not a part of this household anymore, then there is no expectation of privacy on your phone. And I can guarantee you there will be some more severe consequences if you start trying to circumvent these things.
Yep, I think that's reasonable.
And so establishing the boundary with your kids, there is no expectation of privacy. I am sorry, not sorry. But there is no expectation of privacy in this house.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's important. Even if you're giving kids, I'm not anti giving your kids devices for events because, like a special occasion, because they're expensive. It's expensive to buy an iPhone for your kids. So you might as well double that up and make it a birthday gift. But the kid also needs to know, even though this was your birthday gift, you have responsibility to use it responsibly. And if you don't, there is no expectation of privacy, and we can also take it away when we need to.
Yeah, there's no device in this house that is yours.
Yes,
exactly. You are stewards of the device.
Yes, yeah.
At my pleasure.
Yes, at King Travis's house. Yes, that's exactly right. I think you're right on. And having those ongoing conversations with your kids, that's something we also want to stress to parents is that it's not just a one and done. You sat down and had the internet safety talk. It's not the birds and the bees. You're going to have ongoing conversations with your kids about what they're doing with devices because technology is constantly changing, but also as kids age, their interaction with technology is going to change. So the way that your 3-year-old is using technology is very different from the way your 13-year-old or even your 18-year-old is going to use it. So those conversations need to change as your kids age.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Let's talk about VPNs. I hear a lot, and I know you have as well when we've been in schools from kids, asking questions about VPNs. So let's first of all talk about what they are, what do parents need to know about a VPN, and how are kids using them?
Yeah, so a VPN is a virtual private network. And so those are really fancy words to say it makes you look like you're somewhere you're not. So, for example, one of the most common ways that we see people try to use VPNs is to try to get to shows on Netflix that they cannot access in America. And so that's something else that people may not know is that Netflix...
We are not encouraging people to do that, by the way.
This is also true. But, so Netflix, they offer different shows and movies based on where you are in the world, based on the rights that they have acquired and the deals that they've made with those companies of where they can offer these things. And so you may set your location and your VPN to England so you can watch the UK version of The Office, for example. So if that's not available here in America, it might be available over there in the UK. And so what happens is that your device gets an IP address. That's the thing that tells the internet who you are and where you are. It sets it to be in another location. And so whenever Netflix sees you coming in from that device, they're like, oh, this person is not from the US, this person's from the UK. I can show them these certain things. And so it's funny because I hadn't really had any of this with my kids yet. And just this week, one of my kids that plays Minecraft a lot was just like, hey, Dad, can I get a VPN on the computer upstairs? I was like, no, like not even let's have a sit down and have, this wasn't let's sit down and have a conversation about why. Like the answer is just no. And it's one of those things where having that VPN allows him to appear to be somewhere else in the world that he's not. And so it allows access to certain things that are not available in America.
Yes.
And so that's how it works. And so that's how kids are using it to get around that. For a long time, so Major League Baseball, for example, has the most ridiculous blackout restrictions of any major sport.
Yes.
And so, for example, here in Knoxville, Tennessee, we cannot watch the Braves live. And so
Which is insane.
The Braves blackout goes all the way up to like parts of Kentucky, as far west as like Mississippi. And so it's basically the whole Southeast, all of SEC country, even modern SEC country, all the way to parts of Texas are blacked out for the Braves. And so you could use a VPN to make it look like you're in California. And so suddenly the Braves would be available to you.
Yeah.
So
because clearly everybody in California wants to watch the Braves,
so
and not any of us kids that grew
fans.
up watching the Braves on TV. That was all there was to watch our whole lives.
Yeah, so when you were watching on the TBS Superstation, that's how they become America's team.
Yep.
But now you can't watch them if you're in the Southeast, and so but now with a lot of these devices, they're not just using your IP address; they're also using your GPS location on that device. And so even companies have found ways to make it to where VPNs are ineffective for doing that.
Right.
And so VPN is one way they can get around on those. But honestly, it's something that is honestly a lot of work to set up. There are a bunch of tools that you can subscribe to online, but they're not easy. And so I think that's one of the good things for parents is that if your kids have gotten into trying to use a VPN to get around things like that. They have had to do a lot of work to do that. And so that should both comfort you and scare you both at the same time.
Yes, and they probably are not doing that so they can watch the Braves. That is probably not.
Probably not doing that so they can watch the Braves or the UK office. There's some other reason that they're getting into.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say? How do parents know how can they detect that their kids may be using a VPN? Is there an easy way to do that?
Yeah, so it's actually going to be kind of tough, and it depends on the device. And so, fortunately, if they're on a phone, so if they're on an iPhone or an Android phone, and they've got a VPN set up on there, it's going to tell you at the top like VPN access.
Okay.
Another thing is that there are a lot of sites now that don't allow access to them through a VPN, and so if they're like, "Hey, Dad, this website isn't working," that I go to, and it's MLB.com, for example. Because that actually happened to me. So there are good reasons for a VPN, I'll say. So when I go to connect to like hotel Wi-Fi, I have a VPN service that I have, and I turn it on because I don't want for people inside that hotel to be able to track my legitimate traffic.
Right.
Do things like sniff passwords and stuff.
Right.
And so there are legitimate reasons for that. But I also then couldn't, for some reason, get to MLB.com the other day, and I looked up on my screen and I saw the menu bar at the top, and it said VPN. I was like, oh, they probably are doing something to block that. And so that's one of the ways to tell. Otherwise, if you're on a Mac or a PC, be monitoring the apps that are on the computer. Typically, it's going to be something that's going to be running either in the browser. And so check the browser extensions. If you see icons up there at the top that you have not installed, that you have not allowed, check the browser extensions, which usually appear in the upper right-hand corner, or down in the menu bar at the top of a Mac, or down the system tray in the bottom right near the time. So be looking at those apps. And so again, none of these devices are your devices. And so those are the ways that you're going to be able to detect it. But it's going to have to be a visual search. You're going to have to go and look, because otherwise they can be using a VPN and you are really never going to know unless you go look for that app that's running.
Sure. But the comforting thing, back to your earlier point, is it's probably going to be the super techie kids that are doing that, and they've gone to a lot of trouble. It's not going to be probably just the average kid that's like, I got a VPN the other day. Mom and Dad don't know about it. That's probably not going to happen in the average household.
But it could also be your kid that's friends with the techie kid.
Sure.
And then he spread how to install this thing to get to it.
Isn't that so funny? Because all of our parents thought you were a great influence on us growing up, and now you would be the kid that they're all like, watch out, because they're friends with Travis.
That is probably true. I would be that would be the techie friend that the parents have to look out for.
Yep. All right. So if you had to give parents a basic device safety checklist, what would be on it?
So again, I think step one, as I'm going to go to, and I know we've harped on this a couple of times, but set up those family accounts.
Yes.
Because it just gives you access to a host of features that are really easy to use once you get in there and set them up, setting screen time limits, setting time that they can use the devices. And so it's not just setting, hey, they can use this, their phone for 3 hours a day, for example. You can also set on an app by app basis. You can set how long they can use the app. And so like I have so our oldest son does have an Instagram account that we monitor. We go through and look and see, who he's friends with, who he's following. And so we also have a 20-minute time limit for that per day. And so it was kind of funny because he recently came to me and was just like, hey, can I get more time on Instagram? And I told him 15 minutes is enough. And he goes, well, actually I get 20. I'm like, see, there's 5 minutes right there. I've just given you 5 minutes.
Generous.
You're welcome. And so I'd forgotten I set it to 20. And so I told him those were his 5 minutes that he just got.
Yeah.
And so when you have that family set up, you can control all of these apps and if they have access to it, how long they can access it too. Because in my opinion, if you look at the course of a day, 20 minutes on Instagram, to me, sounds like a perfectly reasonable amount of time to see what your friends are up to, interact, and maybe make a post yourself.
Absolutely.
Especially like if you're in school all the way until, 3:30 in the afternoon and you've got, let's call it 5 hours at home that night, a 20-minute block in there should be sufficient for that. And so set those up on whatever to you makes sense as a parent.
Yeah, especially on those apps like Instagram that get you into that doom scrolling loop, because that's what the app is designed to do. It wants to draw you in so you spend as much time there as possible.
Absolutely.
If you're setting some limits as a parent, that's going to help your kids for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. I'll also tell the parents, you might want to set some of those limits yourself.
Yeah.
Again, it's the idea of you're modeling this behavior. And so if you're wondering why your kids are scrolling on social media all day, you might want to wonder why you're scrolling on social media all day too.
Yes.
And so they will model that behavior. And so making sure that you're setting up that family account. And so that allows you to manage the apps that are being downloaded. Again, any app that gets installed on any device in our house, they have to send the request.
Right.
And again, it makes it easy. So if it's Apple Arcade, I don't have to think about it. Yeah, sure, that doesn't look like some sort of weirdo app. And again, Apple's vetting those too.
Right.
And so I don't have to worry about that. If it's some other weird sounding app and it's got, a bunch of, be wary of the 5-star reviews because usually those are bots that are creating the reviews. And so don't just look at it and be like, oh, it must be a good app. It's got 5 stars. Yeah. Don't trust those things. Look at the app, maybe install it yourself and see what it's like. So that way you can see what kind of ads it's going to feed you. So reviewing the app downloads, making sure you're setting up those parental controls. A lot of times whenever you set up the app for your, or the profile for your kid, you're putting in their birthday. And so they will have a default set of things that they can do based on their age. And so make sure you're taking advantage of that.
Make sure the birthday is entered correctly. Don't try to make the kids look older than they are because you think it's easier on your end. There's actually some helpful things if you put your kid's age right.
There is, and so that's also why you don't let the kids set this up on their own, is because they will put in their age.
They're all
whatever
25.
age is necessary to be able to access the app. Use monitoring apps like we talked about, whether it be Live 360 or Bark. Make sure you're using those apps. Know their passwords, and so I make sure that that any password that my kids have, that I know what that password is and I have set that in. If they need to do something on their phones, they typically have to have that password to do it. And so they have to come and ask me, and I don't give them the password to put in. I put in the password myself. And so I think it came up last time. And so a lot of my personal passwords are those random things that were generated by my password keeper. And so that helps from getting hacked, because the worst feeling in the world is to get the email from Netflix that say, hey, your account was just used in Bogota. That doesn't feel great. And so having complex passwords can really help with that. And then the big thing, and we're going to talk about this again, but be the parent.
Yes.
Make sure you're having these conversations and having them often. When something is not quite right with your kid. When that's happening. And so making sure you're having those conversations constantly with them is really the big thing there. Review the phones. Do not set an expectation on privacy when it comes to the devices. And this is all for their safety. And so just like you would lock the front door of the house before you go to bed at night, you're going to lock the front door of these devices.
Yeah, that's great. What's the most important thing parents can do today after watching this episode? Where can they start to better protect their kids on their devices?
I would start by just looking at your ecosystem for your family's phones. So typically most families are iPhone families or they're Android families. It's pretty rare for there to be a mix, but make sure that you're in together with that.
Sure.
And so I think the way to start the conversation, if you've already set up the family, then great. But I think the way to set the conversation is going to be with that humility of like, hey, I haven't done a good job of helping you steward and walk through this. I want to change that today. And have a conversation about what's going on with your phone. And then maybe it's a good idea there to even have the conversation of like, is there anything here that you want to let me know that I might see before I get into it? Because I'm getting into it. Like we're getting ready to, so I'm getting ready to walk into the house. Is there anything that you need to let me know that I might see whenever I walk in there? And so give them that opportunity, because if you don't, then you might end up getting upset if you see things that you don't want to see, that you weren't prepared for. And I'd rather that be as part of the dialogue that you're having with your child instead of what you find as you go through it. And so do that together with them. Say, hey, we're going to look through this. We're going to look through your socials if they've got that. We're going to see what apps are downloaded. I'm going to go through your contacts list, and I'm going to say like, who dis? And so I'm going to do those things. And so starting the conversation and approaching it with a lot of humility and say, hey, so this first time you got into this area, and it's your fault because you did it, but it's my fault because I allowed it to happen.
Sure.
And so say, hey, so there's no, this isn't the hammer coming down. This isn't the punishment. This is okay, we need to know what we didn't know. And we're going to do this together. And from here forward, we're going to set a different course.
Yeah. Gosh, and I think there's been so much great information that you shared today that parents need to know, information I wish I'd known 10 years ago, that hopefully parents will be able to take a lot of this and begin those conversations with their kids, because as you said over and over, that's the most important thing that we want parents to take away from this, is to talk to their kids about what they're doing on devices. So Travis, thank you for your time today. This has been awesome. I look forward to our next episodes. We're going to talk a little bit about social media and gaming in the episodes to come, and it's going to be great.